Hello, everyone, to today's Psychosocial Wednesdays. It's the last one before the summer break. The team of Jungianeum thanks the IIAP for supporting us in the 5th season. And as you already know by now, Psychosocial Wednesdays is a production by Jungianeum, Contemporary Initiatives for Analytical Psychology and Neo-Jungian Studies, and it was founded by Stefano Carpani. And here I seize the moment. I have the latest baby of Jungianeum for you. The New Myth of Analysis for a Neo-Jungian Analytical Psychology by Stefano Carpani. I don't know, maybe you're still looking for the perfect summer holiday read. I will post the link into the chat later. But now to today's speaker. It is Bernhard Hertlein. He is a journalist and human rights activist based in Bielefeld in Germany. Bernhard studied history, political science, and Indology at the University of Heidelberg. He worked as head of the business section of the Westfalenblatt newspaper. In fact, that's where we also shared a desk and where we met and where we know each other since from. He's, I said, an activist. He's the spokesperson for Amnesty International's Bangladesh chapter in Germany and has traveled extensively throughout India and Bangladesh. With Bernhard, today we try something new at Psychosocial Wednesdays. We will hear a presentation on the image of India and also in Jung and India from the perspective of the disciplines of literature and history. Bernhard's research project is concerned with the changing perception of India in the period from 1918 to 1945. His observations are based on German literature of the period, especially youth literature in German. For our purposes here at Psychosocial Wednesdays, Bernhard has adapted the topic a bit and also looked into C.G. Jung's travels. So he will give an insight into what probably brought the Swiss to India and how it influenced him. Bernhard, we are delighted to have you with us today, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Ludmilla, for introducing me. I remember very well our cooperation and our work at the Westfalenblatt. We were and you still are a really good team there. And welcome to all participants from Bielefeld, which is in the center of Germany. Psychosocial Wednesdays, I'm already impressed by this event series, which I followed on YouTube, and I'm very happy to be able to make a small contribution as someone from outside. Ludmilla had already mentioned, from outside the field. Here's what I'm planning. The agenda. First of all, I will give a short introduction to my planned dissertation, which I'm preparing. Second, look at the background, the historical period, which is in my view, the different Indias and the medium, the juvenile literature. Third, challenges and changes of the period 1918 until 1945. And fourth, the results, imaginations and stereotypes about India and the Indians. Fifth, a special look at literature, especially travel reports. And sixth, Carl Gustav Jung's travel to India in 1937 to 1938, about 3 months, and his report afterwards. And seventh, at the end, I will hopefully have time for Q&A and for your comments. So this is the topic of my dissertation. In German Indienbilder in der deutschsprachigen Jung-Lektüre 1918 bis 1945, Images of India in German Language, Youth Readings from 1918 to 1945. And I'm doing that on the University of Wuppertal in the German Studies faculty. Jung came into contact with images of India very early in his life, and in later years, After his journey to India, he himself became a carrier of images of India. I'm writing my dissertation in general comparative literature in Wuppertal. So now my first question to you. What comes in your mind when you think of India? How deeply and in what way is India anchored in your subconscious? Is it a religious image? Images of nature? Before my first trip to India, a friend thought she had to warn me about the snakes there. But I was more excited about the elephants, as you can see. Perhaps you remember that India is now the most populous country in the world. The big social contrast, the caste systems. Or perhaps you see India still as comparatively underdeveloped country. Or we are talking about 2024, contrary that there's high-tech software which is coming from India you have in your mind. Maybe you know better. Everyone has this kind of images in his or her mind, but where do they come from? Literature, I think, is one source and not the little one. German literature offers a wealthy of material in India. The foundations were led by philosophers and Indologists. The image of India in romantic literature was dominant for a long time. Even the great Johann Wolfgang von Goethe used Indian settings, for example, for his ballad Der Gott und die Bayadere. A god does not feel enough love from a temple dancer to him. This narrow patriarchal view was later challenged by other writers, for example, Bertolt Brecht, whose pictures you can see on this image. On the basis of his experience in India, Stefan Zweig criticized the privileges that the West took in the colonies. Friedrich Müller, he was an early Indologist, born in Germany, but he was a teacher in Oxford in UK, and he was proud that he never traveled to India. He didn't want to lose this image of India he had in his mind. The first question I have to answer in my dissertation: who counts as a young person? You might say that depends, and you are right. It depends on the time which we are talking about and the region. And then, who, we ask. Answers may be different from parents, pedagogues, politicians, psychologists, socialists. My provisional answer from a Germanistic point of view: youth begins when children start to read independently, when they are allowed to decide about their literature. And it ends when they start a family, become parents themselves, and at least when they leave youth groups and youth organizations, and that can be very late. Just a view on youth literature. The spectrum is very broad, as you know. In particular, if you consider that youth literature includes books produced for young people, but also all literature that young people choose to read. Regarding the 30 years I'm talking about, I see different phases. Very important for German and European politics are the end of the First World War, the end of the German Empire, and the end of the German colonial period. In between, there are at least 2 dates important for youth literature. Before 1925, Germans, and including young Germans, were not allowed to travel to India. And in 1941, the expansions of the Second World War into Asia brought India back into the spotlight. These phases, these political phases, historical phases, are reflected in youth readings. The widespread interest in the old India, the India of Buddha, of Veda, is a legacy of the period before 1914. Rabindranath Tagore's first visit in Germany supported this image at the beginning, but also brought new impulses. So many young soldiers suffering on the killing fields of the First World War now asked why. And the racists among them, among the youth, blamed United Kingdom for mobilizing, for example, Indian soldiers to fight against soldiers from the same white race. By the way, collection of adventure novels and of fairy tales were huge, but not very different from the time before 1918. A new momentum came in 1926, when a new wave of travels to India produced a new wave of India travel writing. Scientific expeditions influenced adventure literature, and at the same time, or a little bit before, Mahatma Gandhi entered the scene. Then to the religious point, the Catholics and the Protestants mobilized converts against modern Buddhists and Theosophists in youth literature. And from the left side, some writers started to criticize colonialism and exotism in juvenile literature as well. With Adolf Hitler's rise to power, interest in India in Germany immediately declined. In Switzerland and Austria, at least until 1938, the situation remained different. Explorers and mountaineers maintained nevertheless a good readership. Hitler and Sven Hedin, Swedish Sven Hedin, author, were well connected. Some Indian authors tried to correct the image of India as a wonderland, so-called wonderland. In 1941, a wave of adventures and anti-British penny dreadfuls about colonial India was produced as lecture for soldiers, for the young soldiers at the front. In 1945, the Allies stopped this kind of literature. Books related to India were also on the list of books to be discarded. In this 46 years, since the publication of Orientalism, it is 46 years since the publication of, no, that's not what I wanted to say. First wanted to say a little bit about the idea of the geographical India, which was not very clear. It's like it was. I have the picture like a honeycomb system. In the center, the honeycomb queen. The region was around is the region around the river Ganges. So that's here, and at the end, totally, India includes what is now Indonesia, Malaysia, the so-called Indochina, the Pacific Island, and in some cases, India also stands for whole of Asia. Here on the map of 1895, you can read something about Forder Indian, about British Indian, about Hinder Indian, and yeah. So many Indias, so many stereotypes. Don't want to read all these, just have a look. And so many stereotypes and topoi, not only in Germany, but I think also around the world. These are stereotypes which I noticed from the youth literature in the time between 1918 to 1945. So now to the youth literature. Famous for German adventure literature was for a long time, and still it is, Charles May, Karl May. Translation of foreign authors also played a major role, and I'm including them in my dissertation. I want to include them. I must include them, especially Rudyard Kipling with Kim and with the Jungle Book. Here, Jungle Book and Kim. John Hagenbeck. Those who were in have already visited Hamburg, they may have visited the zoological garden there. It's the Hagenbeck Garden. But he recruited Indians as well as Africans for the so-called Völkerschauen, which were zoos for people from the colonies. Really bad racist thing. Then you see here the book of Siddhartha from Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse's grandfather and his father both have been missionaries in India. And Siddhartha and other novels still have a large readership today. Literature is not the only way for transporting images. This photo shows students from a reform school who have dressed up Indians for a special guest here in the middle. This is Sri Aurobindo, a special guest in the Odenwald Schule in the southwest of Germany. Now, it is 46 years since the publication of Orientalism by Edward Said. The debate about the responsibility of Western intellectuals for colonialism, initiated by the Palestinian philosopher, continues to this day, and many oftentimes discussed. His main thesis is that the Orient is an invention of the West, and representations of the Orient in Western literature and science proclaim superiority of whites, and thus they justify colonialism. For example, in the British colonial rule in India as well. One of his theses is that Western science asserted that the Orient has no history, or its history ended a long time ago. This point you will hear later when I'm talking about C.G. Jung. And so the reason to legitimize colonialism, the Orient must be developed and needs guidance from the Occident. Now, back to the point when I'm start with my dissertation, 1918, the First World War and its consequences. The images of India, you all may have seen, or some of you may have seen, All Quiet of the Western Front, either in cinema or on Netflix in last year or this year. It is based on a novel of Erich Maria Remarque, which gives a really good impression on experiences of young soldiers in the First World War. They influenced many discussions and also some books for young people. Literary, for example, Ernst Jünger, The Storm of Steel. For political conservative philosophers such as Oswald Spengler, it was the starting point for prophecies of doom, der Untergang des Abendlandes. By the way, Germany loses 1/7 of its area and 10% of its population, and 3.5 million soldiers from Germany and Austria-Hungary died in World War I. 1921 was the time when a special guest from India caused a sensation in Germany. Rabindranath Tagore, or if I spell it right, it is Thakur, was hailed as a great poet, as the wise philosopher, as the light of the Orient, and he visited Germany 3 times, and most impressive was in 1921. And he was not only this light of the Orient, he surprised with his openness as a reformist teacher who was very much interested in meeting and talking with German youth. Thakur was the founder of Shantiniketan. You see the little picture on the left side. Shantiniketan is a school, university, and educational center for a surrounding rural population, a little bit in the north of Calcutta. And Thakur won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, and as the first non-white author, writer. The second man, with the ability to change the image of India, was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, known as the Mahatma, the Great Soul. He inspired the West with new ideas. His program of nonviolent protest against oppression was revolutionary. But also his pacifism, his homespinning campaign, his campaign against the caste system and against communalism, and for vegetarian food had many followers in Germany too. And along to all these new Indian faces and new ideas, young travelers, journalists, and trade unionists also brought images of modern architecture. This Bombay, the railway station of Bombay, and modern industry and modern mobility, train and cars from India to Europe. And these new images of India were supported as well by new fiction and new non-fiction books. Authors who were born in India and later emigrated, or at least lived in India for a long while, born maybe in Austria or in Switzerland and Germany, played an important role in this, building this new image. Frida Hauswirth on the right side, for example, she was born in Switzerland, emigrated to the United States, married an Indian, and lived in a family environment in India for a number of years. And you see this book, Indian ohne Wunder. The meaning is India without any wonder, or without any secrets. Mansour Uddin Ahmed lived in Berlin. Nevertheless, there was still this two-part images, the black and white dichotomy. On the dark side, you see poverty, begging, disease, and idolatry. And on the bright side, on the right side, you see most writers rave about Buddhism, Mughal architecture, and the unspoiled nature of India. The emphasis on the otherness was fundamental. It was Rudyard Kipling who said, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet." And this otherness, really many authors followed, but not all. Then the world changed in 1933. The Nazi takeover was total, but at the same time, the Nazi ideological base was not monolithic. The Aryan past became an ideology, yes. And everyone who could not present an Aryan identity card was at extreme risk. And you know that 6 million died in the concentration camps. However, there was no consensus as to whether the shared past established a racial kinship with the people of India. Alfred Rosenberg, this picture on the left side, and Heinrich Himmler held this view. The Munich Institute Das Ahnenerbe, the ancestral heritage, financed excursions to India and to Tibet to explore the Aryan past. And another story on the right side above. In 1941, Subhash Chandra Bose escaped from house arrest in Kolkata, British house arrest. Via Afghanistan and the Soviet Union, he reached Germany, a really adventurous story, when he with the support of a special department for India in the Foreign Office in Berlin, he organized the creation of an armed force from Indian prisoners of war. And the plan was to follow the German soldiers to Asia and liberate India. For that, both needed Hitler's approval for this, which he did not get. Nevertheless, he was allowed to go to Batavia, to Jakarta now, to the Allied Japan to raise there an army of Indian prisoners of war, 35,000 soldiers. It was the only time in the World War II that a German submarine came into contact with a Japanese submarine. Nevertheless, both, still known as Netaji, the beloved Führer, leader, managed to liberate a small area in the northeast India. In terms of the juvenile literature, I already mentioned that a large number of penny dreadfuls denouncing the misdeeds of the British colonial power in India is striking. Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels were at the forefront of those who disliked racial ties with the Indians. Hitler already wrote in Mein Kampf, England will only lose India if it either falls victim to racial decomposition, in its own administrative machinery, something that is completely out of the question in India and at the present time, or if it is defeated by the sword of a powerful enemy, means Germany. The Indian insurgents will never succeed in this, as he wrote in 1924 in Mein Kampf. Another quote demonstrates the enormous brutality of Nazi ideology. When Hitler made Viscount Halifax, then foreign secretary in the British cabinet and previously viceroy of British India, in Berchtesgaden in November 1937, he advised him, shoot this Gandhi. Sorry, I'm just citing. Shoot this Gandhi. That will restore peace and order in India. And if that is not enough, shoot another dozen or 200 of the Congress Party leaders. At that time, in November 1937, just a few months later, Carl Gustav Jung was preparing his first and only trip to India. He was already 62. In terms of his interest in India, it was relatively late. Jung had his first contact with India at the age of 6 years when he lived through the book Orbis Pictus, that is from John Amos Comenius. He wrote it in 1657, originally in Latin, and it was full of illustrations. In Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Jung later remembered images of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. This book, one of the statements, including in this book, is the Indians worship the devil even to this day. I cited this. Needless to say, this is nonsense. The invitation to India came from the British India government, not from the university or the Indian Psychologist Association. And it was connected with the Silver Jubilee of the Indian Science Congress Association at the University of Calcutta. C.G. Jung has read before a lot of scientific books about Veda, the Upanishads, about Buddhism, also about Indian art and architectures from different authors. The Heidelberg Indologist Heinrich Zimmer was his friend. Later, he wrote the foreword to Zimmer's book on Sri Ramana Maharishi. Jung met Hermann Hesse several times, and in Zurich as well. And in 1937, some Indian participants of an international philosophers meeting in Paris visited him and talked with him. Now, when in early years, C.G. Jung, as a young man, was not afraid of topics that were a little out of the ordinary. In 1898, at his parents' house, he observed surprising things like self-triggering pistol shots and knives that became rusty over the one night. His young cousin, Helene Preiswerk, called Heli, had parapsychological abilities. For some time, several family members gathered around Heli's every Saturday. So this parapsychological Saturdays. That group included Jung's mother and his aunt. Jung's mother. Jung himself was the only male participant in these seances, except of the one from the afterlife, Jung's and Heli's grandfather, a priest. He talks. The talks were not very deep, mostly family matters. When informed of the occult seance, Sigmund Freud, reacted very negatively. He called it non-scientific and spread his opinion in the scene, even later in India. Nevertheless, the so-called occult phenomena were part of Jung's dissertation. Jung's biographer Gerhard Wehr calls the journey to India, Jung's journey to India, eigentümlich, means peculiar. But the route was still quite normal, mostly touristic. You see Mumbai, Ellora, the Sanchi, Agra, Delhi, Dehradun, Benares, that's Varanasi today, Kolkata, Karnataka, Missouri, Mysore, and so on. But the first shock came in Benares, now Varanasi, when Jung was visiting the Ghats at the river Ganges and the temples of Shiva and Kali. Unable to tolerate the grimness of the city, Jung explained, "I cannot state this any longer," and returned to the hotel. Soon after, 2 days after, he left the official group with whom he traveled from Bombay to Benares until that time, and traveled to Kolkata on his own. By the way, the constant travel companion was Fowler McCormick, a man belonging from his mother's side to the wealthy Rockefeller family, and himself the chairman of the leading harvester company, McCormick, in Chicago. The events in Kolkata did little to improve Jung's mood. On the evening of the first day, a severe case of dysentery forced him to go to hospital. He remained there until nearly the end of the scientific congress. At the same time, he hardly seemed to be missed at the university. The great majority of the Psychiatry Society of India, including the president, were obviously Freudians. After all, Jung received a high political visit at the hospital from the Viceroy, Lord Linlithgow. Jung's own travelogue, to which I refer primarily from now on, was published in New York in 1939 under the title The Dreamlike World of India. In Germany, it first appeared not before 1974. Here you see, on the picture, you see Jung with McCormick and monk from the Ramakrishna mission, and in the back you see the Howley bridge, the bridge over the Howley in Kolkata. This is from the Jung family archive. The photo. In Calcutta, Jung received advices for the rest of his journey from the young Indologist Alfred Würfel and from the sister of the Swiss dancer Alice Bohner. 3 places, all associated with Hinduism, were a real challenge to Jung. Varanasi, I already mentioned. And the second one was the last ancient temple district of Konark, south of Kolkata in Orissa. Here he rated the erotic art as the most disturbing collection of obscenities. In Madura, now Madurai in Tamil Nadu, Jung visited the famous Meenakshi temple with the 4 gopurams. There are towers that are decorated with a barely countable number of colorful and lavishly painted divine figures here. He also attended a dance school and later unwillingly had to listen in the night in his hotel to Indian music. He wrote what you call unreal, I mean, sentimental, grotesque, obscene, monstrous gods that make your blood run cold, unexpectedly becomes a self-evident reality when you listen to an incessant drum concert for half of a hot night. Feel with him when you travel now to hot countries in your holidays. About most of the Indians, Jung did not make very friendly comments in this article, in this travelogue. He spoke about a defect in the character and explained this with overpopulation of India. Even he wrote that the Indians could not think, or they think like the primitive. All Indians, not just the illiterate. About the fate of the Indians, to be born, to die, to be sick, greedy, dirty, childish, ridiculously insignificant, miserable, hungry, all these black topics, depraved, obviously trapped in illiterate unconsciousness, hanging in a narrow universe of good and evil gods. There was only one thing Jung liked very much, and by the way, I can understand him on this point: the sari, the way Indian women dress. At the same time, and I'm not following him here at all, he was sharply critical of Western clothes. He literally wrote, "I sincerely hope that the venereal disease of the West, which tries to convert women into a kind of awkward boys, will not be brought to India in the wake of the fad of scientific education." And at the same time, as he praised the sari as a perfect women's clothing, he found the men's lungi difficult to wear. It looks a bit effeminate and babyish. You just can't imagine a soldier with just garlands of clothes between his legs. That was his ideas when he characterized the people, Indian people. In addition to the sari, 2 places fascinated Jung. The Taj Mahal, and he is not alone with that. The Taj Mahal, the mausoleum of Shah Jahan's beloved Mumtaz, he describes as a heavenly dream crystallized in stone. It awakened in him a desire to learn more about the unfortunately hidden Islamic errors. That was here he wrote. The other place is Sanchi. That is the secret that is sacred to the Buddhists. In the eyes of Jung, Sanchi is truly and essentially Indian. This Indian he liked very much. This India. Let me summarize a few observations here as thesis. The dreamlike Indian world of Carl Gustav Jung is still very oriental, in the word of Edward Said. Jung emphasizes the fundamental difference between the Orient and Occident. He declares even the way of thinking is different. Jung was really impressed about the Veda, but he could not find the Asian philosophy in the modern Hinduism. Buddha, in his view, has come to earth too early. Buddha was the culmination and end point of Indian history. from a religious philosophical point of view, there was no more positive development in India after Buddha. The Hindu religion confused Jung. In addition to Buddhism, he appreciated Islam. He remained silent about the Christian mission in this report, travelogue, and some articles I read. He judged the Sikhs as an ethnic group, not as a religious group. And Jains and Parsis were not mentioned there. Despite his friendship with Heinrich Zimmer, and despite spending some time in Chennai, former times Madras, Jung did not meet Sri Rama Maharishi. You remember, later he wrote the foreword to the biography Zimmer wrote. Jung does not comment on imperialism and all colonialism or on political conditions in general. And Jung did not attempt to meet Rabindranath Tagore or Mahatma Gandhi. Despite their great prominence in Germany, he did not even mention them in a single word in his articles. I mean, he was in Bombay, now Mumbai. That is maybe half-day travel to the place where the ashram of Gandhi was at that time. And he stayed in Kolkata, as I noticed already. And this is not even a half day to Shantiniketan. So it was easy. And also in Kolkata itself, there was a big, I say house, but it's more a palace of the Thakur family. So he could easily meet him, but it seems that he didn't want, that he was not interested in. Two statements, conclusions that Jung drew in his own word. Perhaps I myself had fallen into a dreamlike state in which I was moving among fairy tale characters from the tales of 1001 Nights. And it will take you, this he wrote after visiting Konark, it will take you quite a while, but at the end, if you may have done a good job, you will have learned from something about yourself and about the white man in general that you have probably never heard from anyone else. I think a trip to India, if you can afford it, is one of the whole highly edifying and, from a psychological point of view, highly advisable, although I can give you a considerable headache. Think about it. So this the books I used, not all used, but most of them I used for this for the preparation of this of today. And yeah, sorry that most of them are in German, but the texts of Jung, they're also available in English. And this is the secondary literature about Indian images in German books, not only youth books, but generally, there's a lot of literature, secondary literature, for my dissertation. And many thanks. And Donnerwart. And Dankeschön. And now it's time for your comments, for questions, and maybe also for some of my questions. One is regarding to Carl Gustav Jung. The main sources for me are his comments on yoga addressed to broad readership and his travelogue from 1939. Is there any, do you know any texts which contradict with this from Jung? And Jung was interested in India from an early age. Are there any insights into the background of his early interest in India? And as I already mentioned, I'm a layman in developmental psychology, but I suspect that youth literature has a great influence on people and that it contributes to the reproduction of racist and sexist prejudices, for example. Who knows more about this topic? And if you like, this is my email address. And I'd like to come in contact with you in future as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernhard, for this journey through India. I myself enjoyed very much also the presentation. It was colorful, it was vivid, a bit like I imagine India. Never been there. So yeah, I don't know, maybe are there any questions? I mean, Bernhard has apparently three good questions. And if somebody wants to say something, comment, or ask something back, feel free to do so, or write it in the chat, which is also good. We are happy about interaction. Bernhard, maybe as we have a very international audience, you just now described what was the case for German-speaking literature. Did you also read about other literature and how the perception of India changed in other parts of the world? Or did you neglect that to focus?
I'm include the foreign literature which was translated into German. I mean, youth literature, juvenile literature. For example, Rudyard Kipling, as you know, or Sven Hedin, he was Swedish, and or Danish, some Danish as well. And I have a look on the German youth, because the German youth at that time, it is a very special issue. I mean, after the First World War and before the Nazi took over the power, and before the Second World War. And at this point, and also, you know that the German Indology is very famous worldwide, and it is so, and influence also the youth literature, clear.
We have a question in the chat. I don't know if you are the addressee, but Otto Bedler wants to know, maybe somebody knows of the audience, where did Jung get into Kundalini yoga and who taught him?
There was an Indologist, Hauer, as far as I remember. With him, he had a session in Zurich about Kundalini yoga, and I think Wilhelm Hauer also made him familiar with that. But I'm not 100% sure. And but this Wilhelm Hauer was a really strange Indologist, because after 1933, he played a bad role in the Nazi system, and in the church, in the Protestant church. He was an Indologist and also a theologist, Protestant. But he traveled to India, so that's
very good. Alan Duncan. There's another question in the chat. Alan Duncan asks, did you research the views amongst the German immigrant communities, for example, in North and South America?
South America, at the moment, I have no idea about this in my years. But Frida Hauswirth, I already mentioned, she lived in the States for most of the time. She was from Switzerland, not from Germany, but from Switzerland. And she lived some time in India. She met Mahatma Gandhi, and she appreciated very much. And I appreciate her novels about family life in India. She wrote scientific books and also easy to read novels. And Heinrich Zimmer, he also had to flee from to emigrate from Nazi Germany, and at the end he died in 43, I think, in the States. This Heidelberg Indologist. These two I remember at the moment. There was some of the Indians who lived in Berlin. Before they came, even before the First World War and in the First World War, they came from the United States to Berlin, and yeah, they had big influence. Some of them were communists. Yeah.
Mhm. So yeah, your questions to the audience. Okay, no, wait. Otto Bittler again. Is the Hinduism, Buddhism, yoga that Jung describes real, or is it merely the Western image of those philosophies? What do you think?
Otto, this is a difficult question. I don't know, because I must go to my neighbor. He is a yoga teacher. Maybe he could answer it. But send me your email address, then I will answer him, and then I can give you an answer. I'm not practicing yoga, so I know about the Kundalini and Wilhelm Hauer and this connection with Jung, but not really much more. Especially about what is Indian and what is Western.
Mhm.
I mean, Wilhelm Hauer was a Western Indologist. That's true.
Maybe I have one question, if possible. You mentioned that the image of India for some period it was contained like a lot of Asia, a big part of Asia, and that it evolved later on. Maybe you could tell a few words how it evolved, the image of India and the West, is where it is exactly, what it contains.
You mean geographically or?
Geographically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it was this huge India, I mean, this diffuse image of India, of geographically. Sometimes they talked about Netherlandish India, Netherlands India, sometimes British India, all was India. And there are books about the Indian childs, but they were born in Batavia, for example. Or there was it was a Nazi author, but he wrote about his escaping from Singapore, and he word by word he wrote the title of the book is "My Escape from British India," but he wasn't in British India at all. He left Singapore to Batavia. They stayed maybe 1 week, and then he went through Japan and the Soviet Union to Germany to join the army, the Nazi army, the German army. But yeah, but at the end of this this time, at 45, 48, when India became independent, then there was a much more clear idea about India. And some is questionable. For example, Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, some count to India, some not. Myanmar, some count to India, some not. Burma at that time. And Tibet, yeah, most add to include to India, but at the end of the time, the now the Indian Union, this was plus Pakistan and now Bangladesh. This was what most of the Germans who are interested in India had this idea of geographically. And what I'm also what changed, I mean, is this image of India. I mean, from only this old culture, and then if you see the modern times, that's just bad. And but people who are interested in politics, and even Jawaharlal Nehru also visited Germany, and they had this modernized and contemporary image, Indian image in their mind.
have a question. Prashant Matlani, you've raised a hand.
Hello there. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to have this question answered. My question is, if you could go back to the slide, there was something written about the Indian who doesn't think, but instead he perceives the thought, or something to that effect. There was something that Jung had observed, and so according to Jung, that kind of thinking, or rather that kind of perception of holding the thought from an Indian perspective, that makes him a primitive.
Yeah.
Could you just have maybe explain a little more in the sense, how would that make someone primitive? It's quite fascinating the way Jung had observed that kind of a thing. Yeah, this one, the right
This
here.
one. Yeah, he was thinking that I mean, the time of what is Aufklärung in English, enlightenment, in the philosophical environment, Immanuel Kant and these all in Europe, and I think that this has in Jung's view, this is different from the difference between Europe and India, and he think that yeah, what should I say? That he excused at the beginning, excused to his Indian friends what he's saying then, and so far that is he does not think it at least that not what we call think, rather he perceive the thoughts. That's what Jung's saying. He perceived the thought, and not in this analytical way, but he also argue that the Europeans, the Western world, is missing that direct entry to direct and entry to your soul.
Right. So would you say that perceiving a thought is rather holding a thought? I mean, I'm just trying to understand. It is rather holding a thought and giving that thought a consideration of what could probably it mean, or in terms of its implications, something to that sort.
Can you just repeat?
Sure. I'm just trying to understand that, perceiving a thought, meaning does that mean to be perceiving a thought means to hold that thought in your mind and think about its implications, what it
Not
could
the
mean.
implications, only the direct what he read, what the Indians read, or what they were taught, then they can follow, but not.
Right.
Sorry, I'm saying what Jung argue, and not by themselves develop new thoughts.
Right. Well, it helps enough. Maybe I should take a look at it. This quote is from Memories, Dreams, Reflections, right?
It is from the Dreamlike World of India.
Okay, all right. I'll maybe take a look at that. I have another question. May I ask, or do I have to let someone else go?
Of course, you can. Yeah.
Well, thank you. The next question is, you mentioned about the Nazi expedition to Tibet. Could you explain what was the purpose of that expedition, and whatever the purpose was, did they happen to achieve that purpose?
Okay. Yeah, it was. I mean, when you the racist ideology and the Germans were forefathers were the Aryans. The forefathers of the Germans were the Aryans, and they came from Inner Asia, and so also the Brahmins, especially in India, they were their forefathers also were Aryan. So and they want to prove that, and that there was one yes, there were some excursions. One also, I mean, Sven Hedin, the Swedish scientist and author, but and also what is Schäfer. The name of the German one is Schäfer, a geographic scientist. They went to Tibet to find out, for example, if the language, can you prove that the Hindi language and the Sanskrit language is and the German language have the same origin, for example.
Okay.
That would be one proof that we have the common forefathers.
Right. Okay. But I think this was something eventually known anyway, that this is why languages such as French and German and maybe other European languages, they are called Indo-European languages.
Yeah.
All
But
right,
at that time in Germany, they told it that they told it Indo-German.
Oh wow!
languages
Okay. Well, thank you.
at
Thank you for your answer,
universities.
sir.
Not nowadays, but in the past.
Right.
At that time.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you.
I mean, these Nazis. I mean, there was a lot of critics about the Brahmins, about the caste system in left German juvenile literature books. But the Nazis, they supported the Brahmins because they said they are our brothers. Some of the Nazis, I mentioned that Hitler and Goebbels, they didn't join this group of Rosenberg and Himmler and others. Hauer also.
No, this is fascinating. Okay.
Oh, okay, fascinating is a good word. Thank you, Rashid.
I can read out one more question from the chat. Otto Bedler again wants to know how many Indians have read the Upanishads or other
Upanishads.
Hindu and Buddhist classics. Good question. So
about the Indians.
Yeah. How about the other way around? I mean, also maybe from your experience. I don't know if you talk to people.
Okay.
In India.
I don't think that. I mean, the Brahmins, they read the Veda. I mean, the more Indians read the Veda and the Upanishads than in Germany. But there was a huge group in Germany as well. I mean, the Indologists at the university. But yeah, I mean, there is a reason why Jung was so disappointed about what he found in India about Hinduism and what is really different from that what he read about in his books about Veda and Upanishads. Do you have an idea? How many Indians? I don't know. Nowadays, it's more important again because of this political change in India.
He says, I just wonder if this wisdom is used there. Can you say something?
The wisdom of Veda and Upanishads is used.
Yeah, whether it's used.
I mean, on the in the way of on the university background in the central temples, yes, but not in the daily life and not in the political scene. I mean, it is used, but not in this true sense, I think.
And he asks also in India by the population?
Don't think so. I mean, if you asked about in Germany, if you go on the streets and ask the Germans about the New Testament and what Paulus read in his letters, I don't know how many Germans know nowadays about that. And you have also to consider that in the South continent, I mean, I don't know exactly, 120 million in Pakistan, 170 million in Bangladesh, and about 110 million inhabitants of, or 100, I don't know exactly, in India. They are Muslims already in the subcontinent. So why should they read the Upanishads? Or also there are many Jains, and but the Buddhism is very low in Ceylon, yes, and in Myanmar, but in India it is. Yeah, but they have incorporated the Buddhism and the Hinduism, and I think that's a good way. I like the cat, Michal. What's his name?
She's called Cora.
Cora, okay. Cora.
Maybe to turn the question, I ask how did the West see India geographically? How the India sees itself geographically, maybe to turn around.
At that time?
At that time, yes.
Yeah, I think it's clear. I mean, because there's the Indian Congress Party, it was very active at the moment already. It was, yeah, there was a discussion about, for example, maybe Kashmir, Tibet, or so. But but it was what is now the Indian Union, plus Pakistan and Bangladesh. That is for the Indians, for the independent movement. It was clear what India is. Also for Netaji, for this Bengal freedom fighter who met Hitler, Germany. By the way, when I first went to India in the 80s, and I was asked as a young student, what do the Germans think about Netaji, about Subhash Chandra Bose? And yeah, I tried to give a friendly answer because for India, he's still a great person, despite he was allied with Hitler. But I mean, Nehru. I mean, the British tried to send, or they already sent it, the Bose's, the members of the army of Bose, to jail. But Jawaharlal Nehru, immediately let them free and said they are part of our independent movement in 1948.
Otto Gedler, but that's more related to the question before, like how many Indians have read the Upanishads. He quotes Gandhi, who said, "Christianity is a wonderful idea. Too bad it hasn't been tried."
Yeah, that's about Gandhi. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Gandhi said it, but nevertheless, he was a Hindu. He was Hindu by his heart, but he was open. He was quite open. I mean, he was a vegetarian, as you know, but nevertheless, when he was in London, he already tried. At one time, he tried cow. What is? Yeah, meat, cow meat, but he didn't like it, so he stopped immediately. He said Gandhi said his life is a message, and he tried several experiences with himself. But in his some of the Jews which had to escaped from Germany, from Nazi Germany. They joined him in the 30s, and but then afterwards, in 1939, they were imprisoned, jailed, together with a Nazi German, and that was really a bad thing. For example, in Dehradun, somebody of you have read Heinrich Harrer, 7 Years in Tibet. He was a Nazi. I mean, yeah, he was a Nazi, and the British give the Nazi the leadership in these prisoners camps, and the Jews living there suffered again under the Nazis in this prisoners camp. That's one of the bad stories, which. Okay, but nevertheless, some of these Jews, not only Jews, but also political opponents, communists also as well, they survived because they got shelter in India, British India at that time.
Another question by Otto Bedler. You touched upon the topic, I think. Did Jung dislike Gandhi, or was he uninterested?
He was uninterested. I don't think that I can't imagine why he disliked it. Or he just think he was. Sometimes some people say he was. The picture, the image was too big. Maybe Jung thought it as well. I don't know. But it's really strange. I mean, one thing is that Jung. It shows that Jung was only interested in the old India, and Gandhi was not old India. And Thakur, yeah, partly was old India, but also modern India, because he was a modern reformist teacher, and also he supported the independence movement, not as a real fighter, but he supported them. But he was not interested in Jung. I mean, he was very disappointed about India most of the time. Not about the.
Sorry, but Otto Bedler asked, was he maybe jealous?
Jealous. Okay. Yeah. I think what made him angry was that the psychologists in India, they were not interested in his research. That he followed, most of them followed, not all, but most of them followed Sigmund Freud. That made him disappointed. I think, I don't know what he not only he didn't wrote about Gandhi, he also didn't wrote a single word about the British, the colonists. I mean, yeah, no, not one word he wrote, but that is not very important. He wrote that they are homesick, and maybe he was also a little bit homesick because. He much liked the Himalaya. He was only for a short time in Himalaya, but that he liked, and this is a little bit like Switzerland, okay? So.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we call it a day at this point, because I think we all learned a lot of new things. Well, I did for sure. Thank you, Bernhard, for taking us on this journey to India and back.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
It was very great having you. And Psychosocial Wednesday says goodbye for now, and we hope to see you all again after the summer break that you maybe spend in India or wherever. On September 18th, we have Björn Fedder here. He is a philosopher and will talk about the role of fathers in the future. So 18th of September, save that date, and we hope to see you then. And until then, have a great summer. Thank you.
You too.